There's a specific window in JRPG history where the genre was doing something it hasn't done consistently since. Not dangerous in a marketing sense, and not edgy in the way that word gets used now. Studios were funding games built on ideas that had no guaranteed audience, with systems that punished players with ambitious stories. The people making these games were allowed to fail on a massive scale in pursuit of something that didn't have a blueprint. What this video is really about is what made them possible in the first place, the conditions that let them exist. Persona 2 Innocent Sin wasn't officially localized in North America for 12 years. Atlus made a decision in 1999 that Western audiences weren't ready for a game where spreading a rumor that the infamous mustache guy was still alive causes him to actually appear as a boss, leading an army of Persona users. They were probably right. It's also one of the most thematically distinctive JRPGs the PS1 produced. The contact system lets you negotiate with demons through branching social exchanges. Different combinations of taunting, threatening, flattering, or questioning yield different results, and successful contacts give items or recruitment. The rumor mechanic goes further. Rumors you spread at specific locations literally reshape the world. If a rumor exists that a store sells cursed weapons and you spread it, that store sells cursed weapons. The world responds to belief. The relationship between Tatsuya and June, built slowly, revealed carefully, resolved devastatingly, is the emotional core the game earns across its runtime. I couldn't have anticipated what it would mean when the ending asked me to give it up. The opening hours, however, move fairly slow, and the combat is repetitive in ways that require faith in where it's going. That faith is justified, but the early hours ask for it. The ending requires you to give up something most games don't acknowledge exists. When you understand what that is, you'll understand why this one spent 12 years unreleased. Chrono Cross has 45 playable characters. And here's the thing most people miss. The game knows most of them don't matter individually. But that isn't a flaw. The MC is deliberately empty. The 45 characters are deliberately peripheral. This is a game about parallel worlds and the way alternate versions of events produce people who shouldn't exist. And the sprawling, sometimes unfocused cast is what that looks like rendered literally. You're not assembling a party. You're accumulating evidence. The dual world structure, home world and another world, differentiated by a single pivotal moment, means almost every location has two versions. Every character has an alternate self. Every relationship exists in a slightly different key. The game uses that structure to ask uncomfortable questions about causality, about whether changing the past is ever worth what you'd lose to do it. I came to this expecting Chrono Trigger, which I think is what almost everyone does. It took me a second playthrough to hear what it was actually saying. It can still be alienating as a direct sequel. Surge's blankness is frustrating, and the emotional warmth of Trigger is largely absent. These are real losses the game doesn't compensate for entirely. Yasunori Mitsuda's score is one of the greatest in the history of the medium. And the ending, if you let it, hits differently than anything else on this list. The opening sequence of Parasite Eve takes place during an opera hall. By the end of it, the entire audience has spontaneously combusted, and that's the inciting incident. Square in '98 made an ARPG survival horror hybrid about mitochondria evolving into a hostile life form that murders you from the inside out. Aya Brea is a New York City cop investigating the outbreak, and battles play out in real time. You move freely during enemy turns, positioning matters, and the metabolic energy you accumulate between fights unlocks parasite powers that mutate in directions the game doesn't fully telegraph. Every encounter is a resource decision made under pressure. The horror atmosphere isn't set dressing, it's the design. Familiar New York City locations turned organic and wrong and threatening in ways that don't follow normal monster logic. I wasn't ready for Carnegie Hall. Nothing in 1998 could have prepared me for it. The second half, though, loses the narrative clarity of the first, and the true ending requires a new game plus run. A structure that works better in theory than when you're doing it. A game built on the premise that the cells inside your own body might turn against you. In 1998, the dangerous era was just getting started. Koudelka is the game almost nobody played that became the game you might love, if you know where to look. A psychic medium named Koudelka arrives at a remote Welsh monastery in 1898 to investigate supernatural disturbances, and what unfolds is one of the darkest, most atmospherically committed horror RPGs the PS1 produced. The combat is grid-based and tactical. No random encounters, enemies visible in the environment, positioning and formation matching in ways that felt genuinely alien in the genre at the time. Saknith built the lighting and sound design to communicate dread in ways the hardware had no business supporting. The connection to Shadow Hearts is direct. Koudelka's world becomes Shadow Hearts' backstory. Playing them in sequence reveals a universe built with more care than either game's sales ever reflected. I came to this while researching Shadow Hearts and immediately understood where every important design decision came from. Then there's the combat that's clunky in ways that tells a team still discovering their system, because they were. Camera navigation in certain rooms is actively disorienting. The patience it asks isn't always paid back quickly. But without this game, Shadow Hearts doesn't exist. And without that, one of the most original combat systems in JRPG history also doesn't exist. Final Fantasy VII opened Western audiences to what JRPGs could be, and it did so with a premise that has no business being as mainstream as it became. A traumatized soldier with a constructed identity, a dying planet being bled dry by a corporation, and an antagonist whose motivation isn't conquest, but the belief that humanity has forfeited its right to live here. Sephiroth wants to wound the planet badly enough to trigger its self-healing response, and uses himself as the wound. That's pretty notable for a villain in 1997. The materia system runs magic as transferable equity, orbs anyone can use, stackable, with combinations that create emergent effects the game never fully explains. You figure it out. And there's the moment in the sleeping forest that changed what players thought games could do. A moment that nobody who experienced it has fully recovered from. I was really young the first time. I didn't have words for what happened in the Forgotten Capital. I still find it hard to use the right ones. But I still think Disc 3's build toward the final dungeon loses narrative momentum in ways that feel uneven after what came before. The original localization has famous rough patches a modern player will notice. FF7 is where this era began for Western audiences. Everything on this list grew from the seed it planted. The Judgment Ring is a clock face with a rotating hand. You press a button. Hit the window, your character attacks. Hit the narrow inner stripe, they deal bonus damage. Miss the window entirely, the turn is wasted. That's it. And it keeps you engaged for the entire runtime in a way that passive menu combat almost never does. It's set in 1913, the eve of World War I, across colonial China and Europe. And they ran that setting through a lens of supernatural horror that the period had never been given before in this genre. Yuri Hyuga collects monster souls through battle and fuses with them mid-fight, transforming into creatures with distinct abilities and parameters. The Malice system means dark energy builds as you battle, threatening to summon a punishing manifestation if you let it accumulate unchecked. The relationship between Yuri and Alice Elia develops with more earned weight than I expected. A horror-adjacent JRPG with a love story at its center, and the love story works. But Shadow Hearts is rougher than its sequel. Certain late sections drag. Some character arcs don't get the space they deserve. Covenant took every strong idea here and refined it. Treat this as the origin of something rather than the finished article. Shadow Hearts earned its cult following. It always deserved more than a cult. Which game from this list was the one that changed how you understood what games could actually be? drop it below, and subscribing keeps me making these. Every character you recruit in Valkyrie Profile is already dead. You witness their final moments, their death scene, the end of their story before they join you. And then you carry them with you, knowing what they lost. Lenneth Valkyrie travels a version of Norse mythology, collecting the souls of the heroic dead to prepare them for Ragnarok. The side-scrolling exploration is unusual for a JRPG of its era, and the 4-button battle system assigns each face button to one party member. Landing attacks in sync with others triggers tri-attacks, and the rhythm of a perfect chain is deeply satisfying once you find it. Each character's recruitment is self-contained, a complete life, an ending, a reason to care about someone you've already lost. The true ending requires sending specific characters to Valhalla at specific chapter intervals, with specific equipment, while holding on to nobody you weren't supposed to keep. The requirements are arcane. Reaching it without guidance is nearly impossible. The game that rewards total mastery actively obscures its own best conclusion. I finished my first run with ending C, I think. Found out what ending A was and started over immediately. The ending requirements are hidden well enough that even devoted players often miss them. If you want the full story, look them up before you start, not after. Valkyrie Profile treated death not as a game over screen, but as a design philosophy. In 1999, nothing else on this system looked like it. Disc 2 of Xenogears has almost no gameplay. The entire second half, originally designed as a full disc of dungeons, boss fights, and explorable environments, was compressed into text boxes, voice narration over static portraits, and brief visual sequences. Square ran out of time and money. The development team knew it, but shipped it anyway, because a broken ending to this specific game was still more necessary than no ending at all. The most ambitious JRPG ever made, shipped incomplete, still doing things no game had done before or since. The story spans 10,000 years of human history. A war between two immortal beings manipulating civilization from the beginning, organized religion as a system of population control, a love story across multiple lifetimes, and the question of what happens when humanity creates what it believes is God and discovers it might be something else entirely. The giant gear combat exists in a different physical register from the ground-level fights, and both registers say something about the story. Tetsuya Takahashi left Square after this game and founded Monolith Soft to continue the work in Xenosaga and eventually Xenoblade. That continuation exists because this one game demanded more than one game could contain. I finished Disc 2 and sat with it. What I'd experienced was a game that reached for something nobody had reached for before and hadn't quite made it. I was more moved by the attempt than I would have been by a polished success. The world ends in the first hour of Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. Not as backstory, not as a flashback, but you watch it happen, and then you keep playing in what's left. The Vortex world is Tokyo after the conception, a ritual that collapsed reality into a demon-inhabited sphere where competing philosophies are vying to shape whatever replaces the old world. You become half-demon early in the game, and the three main alignment routes ask you to choose between absolute order through strength, total individual freedom, or the stillness of a universe without desire, with the true demon ending available if you reject all of them and decide nothing deserves to survive, including you. The press-turn battle system runs on momentum. Exploiting an enemy weakness grants extra actions. Hitting a null or absorb costs them. A perfect fight feels like a machine running correctly. Then Matador appears. I died to Matador 3 times before looking up a strategy. I was too proud to look it up before that. I was wrong. Nocturne is deliberately brutal and doesn't warn you. Certain bosses require full party reconstruction. The difficulty is inseparable from the design. This is not incidental. Most JRPGs let you save the world. This watches the world end and then asks you what should come next. That question is the entire game. Vagrant Story has no shops, no random encounters, no party, no level cap, and no clear difficulty setting. The weapon you've been upgrading for 8 hours might be completely wrong for the next dungeon. Square knew all of this. They shipped it anyway. You enter Lea Monde, an abandoned city, in pursuit of a cult leader who has taken a nobleman's family. The mystery is told in flashback fragments and in cutscene dialogue that was localized with the care of literary translation rather than game translation. Reading Vagrant Story's dialogue feels different from reading other games' dialogue. The weapon affinity system is the design. Every blade and staff develops specific resistances against enemy types through repeated use, making each dungeon a question of what you're bringing in and whether it's right. No weapon is universally correct. That's the point. The risk system adds another layer. Executing perfect combos raises a gauge that reduces accuracy. Mastering the game means managing your own momentum. I played it 3 times before I fully understood the weapon system. The third playthrough was the best game I'd ever experienced on PS1 hardware. Vagrant Story can be impenetrable on first contact. Do not go in without understanding the affinity system. Not knowing it means missing the entire mechanical core. The most technically sophisticated game the PS1 ever ran. It has never been fully appreciated for that. It deserves to be. Final Fantasy X built its emotional case across 30 hours before it earned the right to use it. Spira is a world where religion has convinced an entire civilization to accept cyclical death as divine order, and the story of how that system perpetuates itself, who it serves, and what it costs the people inside. It is the most mature political storytelling the mainline Final Fantasy series has ever committed to. The sphere grid turns character growth into physical navigation. You move through a branching web of nodes, choosing direction, building the character you want. The conditional turn-based system shows you the order of every upcoming action, meaning every choice happens with full information. The ending came for me in a way I hadn't seen coming despite spending 30 hours building toward it. That's how the setup works. The longer you care, the harder it lands. Certain line readings in the English localization are a genuine miss. Some delivery choices just don't work. This was the last mainline entry that trusted a single linear story to carry a full game. What it built inside that structure, it built well. Xenosaga Episode 1 opens with a cutscene that runs close to 20 minutes. People complained about this. They were missing the point. This trilogy is philosophical science fiction. Episode 1 establishes the universe, the relationship between technology and consciousness, and does so with a density of lore that trusts you to keep pace rather than stopping to explain what everything means. Cosmos is introduced here, what she does near the beginning of the game. Not what she's designed to do, what she actually does, establishes a question the entire trilogy spends its runtime trying to answer. If you've seen the Episode 3 coverage in the PS2 video, you know where that question lands. The combat here is the weakest in the trilogy. Certain dungeon stretches are padded in ways that don't serve the story. The cutscene to gameplay ratio is extreme even by the standards of games that know they're cinematic. Episode 1 is building towards something rather than delivering something. That requires trust the game doesn't always earn. But the universe it's building, asking what God is, what consciousness costs, whether humanity deserves saving, is worth the investment to reach. It all starts here. The window that produced these games didn't close because the ideas ran out. It closed because the audience for risky, expensive, philosophically ambitious JRPGs wasn't large enough to justify the cost of making them. And publishers started playing it safer, and the genre slowly became something more predictable. These games were allowed to be dangerous. And the ones that made it through still feel different from everything that surrounds them. Which game from this era changed something about how you understood what games could do? Not your favorite, the one that moves something. Drop it in the comments. And if this is the kind of coverage you come here for, subscribing keeps me making it. I can't overstate how much it matters.